Hi there. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the quadratic formula today. That's sort of what this video is about. But in class, we sort of first looked at these two functions, and we said, which one can you factor? To review, to factor a function means to split it up so that it's, the multiplication of two binomials, and I need numbers that multiply to equal 15, but at the same time, they should add to equal negative 10. And you can do 5 times 3, and you can do 15 times 1. You could do negative 5 times negative 3, negative 15 times negative 1. All of those would multiply to equal 15, but none of them will add to equal negative 10. And so this one you couldn't factor. It does have zeros, but you can't factor it. The other function, however, I think you can factor, because we would need to think of numbers that multiply to equal negative 4, and that would be 2 times 2, or maybe how about negative 2 times 2, or they could also be 4 times 1. I think in this case it would be 4 times negative 1, because 4 plus negative 1 is 3, right? And that's what we want. We want them to add to equal that number, the b term, while they multiply to equal the c term. And so it was x plus 4 times x minus 1, and that let us figure out that the zeros were x equals negative 4, because negative 4 plus 4 is 0, and x equals positive 1, because 1 minus 1 is 0. And that's a great way to find the zeros. If you can't do that, you could complete the square maybe and graph it and see if you can find the zeros that way. But what if you can't factor it and completing the square is not that great? Well, the quadratic formula is a way that you can find the zeros of any quadratic if they exist. So it comes from this is what we call standard form. And if you're given a quadratic in standard form, where you have a number times x squared plus another number times x plus a third number, you could find the zeros by setting that equal to 0 and solving for x. And I would love to go through the process of solving for x, but that's maybe a whole other video that I might make. But if you did that whole process, if you went through all of the algebra steps of getting x by itself, what you would end up with is this, and this is what you want to write down. It's called the quadratic formula. So quadratic formula is it finds the x's, it finds the zeros, and it's the x's that make a 0 come out of the function, and it looks like this. Negative b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2a. And I am sympathetic to just how scary that looks to many, many beginning algebra students, right? That does look scary, because there's all these letters, and it seems like, how am I ever going to do this? But it is actually just several steps of math. It is actually, when it comes down to it, it's just PEMDAS, which I believe you would have learned in about the 6th grade, right? There are no parentheses, but you can kind of think of this here as parentheses. There are exponents, there's some multiplication, there is some division, and there is some addition and subtraction. So all of that's important. But where do these a, b, and c come from? Well, they come from the 3 values that you find in the quadratic function. So let's do one example. It's the one that we know the zeros for already. By factoring it, I figured out that the zeros were negative 4 and positive 1, right? That was what I did at the beginning of the video. But instead, let's use the quadratic formula, and I'm going to identify a, b, and c first. So a, b, and c are found in the function. A is next to the x squared. There is no number, but that means that a is 1. B is a positive 3, and c is a negative 4, right? Those are the 3 numbers that we use in the quadratic formula. And most of the work is plugging the numbers in. So the first thing, it says negative b. Well, b is 3, so I'm going to write negative 3. And then I write plus and minus, and then I use the square root symbol. It says b squared. And so that means I'm going to use 3 to the 2nd power. Minus 4 times a, which is a 1, times c, which is a negative 4. And then I'm supposed to divide that whole thing by 2 times a, which is, again, a 1. So all of the numbers, the 3's, oops, not that one. Okay, that 4 is part of the formula, but that negative 4 there, and then these 2 1's, those are just these 3 values plugged into the formula. And now our job is to just simplify this, okay? So we're going to get 2 zeros, remember, negative 4 and positive 1, but that's because of the plus and the minus, right? That means that plus and minus sign means we're going to get 2 answers, often. Not always, but often. All right, so let's continue to simplify this bad boy. So I'm going to start with the part that's under the radical symbol, the square root symbol. by evaluating these things. So 3 to the second power is 9. Okay. Now this part here, this term, it says you're supposed to subtract 4 times a times c, but think of that as a negative 4 times a 1 times a negative 4. And a negative times a negative is a positive. So because this c term was negative, it flips that minus sign in the formula here to a plus sign. And 4 times 4 is 16. And then, of course, 2 times 1 is 2. So now I just keep solving. 9 plus 16 is easy enough. That's 25. And hey, I know the square root of 25. Do you know the square root of 25? So all I did on that step was I did the addition of the bit that's under the radical symbol, because again, that radical symbol is treated like parentheses when you're doing PEMDAS. All right, so now we have to plus and minus. And so the square root of 25 is both positive and negative 5, and that's why we have a plus and minus sign there. So what I need to do is negative 3 plus 5 divided by 2, because that 5, again, is just 25, the square root of 25, and then I have to do negative 3 minus 5 divided by 2. Same thing. And negative 3 plus 5 is positive 2, and positive 2 divided by 2 is 1. And guess what, my friends? We were supposed to get a 1, because that was what we discovered when we factored. And negative 3 minus 5 is negative 8. And negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. And we were also supposed to get a negative 4, right? That matches what we did. So it would probably be easier to just factor this and find the zeros that way. But if you can't factor it, you have to use the quadratic formula, which is why you're going to want to come back to this video in the future.